like this thing.
This side.
All right, thanks. Hey, how are you?
Where's Munch?
I don't know. Just went out.
Facebook. Sorry.
We can wait, we have time.
Yeah.
He's gonna be fine, it's definitely.
Just so
So we're not
excited.
hanging with him.
I'm an audio.
How many GRU? 1,000, 4,000? She was saying,
Oh, yeah, right.
1,000 so many pages.
Because her thing is,
Where'd you get that money?
she wants to run for.
Not responsible because nobody's paying me, and if I mess it up, I'm just gonna yell at me, probably.
The presidency of the election, so that's why you have to let me be a candidate for the Democratic Party. That's what her thing is about.
It's on Sasha.
So do let me know when you're ready, okay?
2 minutes.
Okay, no, take your time. Well, you ignored me with that, didn't you? I said you ignored me on that. He's talking about. Here's the money. It's right here. No, you're waiting for Don.
Yeah, probably, yeah, might be best, yeah. What did I do with
We're setting up the audio right now.
Hello, folks. My My name is Nellie Hester Bailey, and I will be your moderator for this very exciting workshop that's coming up. But right now, we are waiting for our videographer to finish setting up, and we will begin shortly, okay?
Yep. Okay, it'll take about a minute and a half.
No, in the meantime, if there are any of you in here not familiar with Black Agenda Report, we want to let you know. You can go online, blackagendareport.com. You can sign up for free for our newsletter. Just go to the website. And of course, we ask you if you, in fact, like what we are doing, if you understand what we are doing, that you support us with a donation. And again, go to the website, www.blackagendareport.com.
One more minute, we'll wait for it to boot up.
So while we are waiting for our videographer, we're just going to go into this with introductions. I'll start with myself. My name is Nellie Bailey. I co-host Black Agenda Radio with Glenn Ford, who is the executive editor of Black Agenda Report. He is also the producer and host of Black Agenda Radio, and again, I co-host that with him. I have been a longtime housing rights advocate in Harlem. We have had an anti-gentrification campaign for about 2 decades, and as we all know and recognize, that we have been on the losing end of that in large part to our Black misleadership class in cities all over the country. And this panel is called Understanding Our Resistance. And we all have to get with our little technology here. And this is a very important, and it's unusual for the left because instead of an array of speakers, we only have 2, and so we can go in depth with an analysis of the crisis of imperialism and the implosion of the deep state, and we see it every day. So this panel, Understanding Our Resistance, has the following synopsis. Contradictions of U.S. empire. Trump and the neocons. The central question of U.S. politics is centered upon whether or not the U.S. empire can achieve hegemony in the face of China, Russia, and new emerging global alliances. And our key speakers, again, are Dr. Anthony Montera, who will challenge, along with Glenn Ford, both will challenge the conventional wisdom of the U.S. left. Professor Anthony Montera is a Du Boisian scholar. He is also a regular contributor to Black Agenda Report. And again, Glenn Ford is the executive editor of Black Agenda Report. And I believe, and our videographer is Don DeBar, who will give me the signal.
In about 1 second.
In 1 second.
Sorry about that.
Well, while we're waiting for that, I do encourage you to perhaps attend our another Black Agenda workshop that we have, Resisting Trump, Exposing the Democrats. And that's today from 3:30 p.m. to 5:15 p.m. And that's in room 1.91. So you might want to attend that. Okay, are we ready?
Go ahead, this is the first, we're recording over here, so it's okay.
Oh, okay, so shall
Put
I?
that in the middle of, like, right on the point there. And it'll-
Yeah, right, I don't have to go through that introduction
Nope.
again, do I?
No, we got enough tape here.
Okay, great. So we are going to start right now, and I'm going to hand the mic over to Glenn Ford and Tony Montero.
You really have 1.5 speakers here. I'm going to follow Tony Montero's lead, as is often the case when we speak frequently on Black Agenda Radio, because he leads us in directions that I think we want this conversation to go. And so I'm passing the mic.
Well, thank you very much, Glenn and Nellie. And I'd like to thank Nellie for setting this up. And, usually, well, many times when I'm on Black Agenda Radio being interviewed by Glenn, after the interview is over, I ask him, why do you always ask me the most difficult questions? Everybody else gets, it seems to me, easier questions.
See, we question on a curve, and you're a curve.
Okay, I'm glad to know that. But I've always enjoyed my interactions with Glenn, because I'm certain, as most of you or all of you in here know, Glenn is not just a journalist, but he is a major intellectual on the left. And if we have a new name for our black sellouts, the Black Misleadership class, we owe that insight to Glenn Ford. And I am unable, I don't have the opportunity always to thank him for so much of what he does. Now, Nellie pulled this together, and we talked about it, and one of the things that we are concerned about is some of the problems in the left and what is called, and I put quotes, the resistance. I think this conference, this forum, is called The Resistance. And clearly, and I'm certain many of you would kind of agree with this, how do we distinguish the left from the liberals and neoliberals? How is the left not the same as the corporate Democrats? And really, the deep state. We see this convergence, and the left, and I would say pretty much the white left, has not been able to come forward with a consistent analysis appropriate to this moment in the history of world capitalism. I would say, just to begin, that Trump's election was not an event. It was the result of processes, and I think we can see it more clearly now, processes that perhaps go back to the Great Recession of 2007, 2009. The greatest downturn in the economies of global capitalism since the Great Depression. And in a lot of ways, the political crisis, which you know, in interviews with Glenn, I usually refer to a crisis of legitimacy. That is to say, the old forms of governing and ruling the people are no longer acceptable to perhaps the majority of the people. Now, that is not to say that everyone has come to that conclusion from the same place politically. But I think it is beyond question that we are in a crisis of legitimacy. All of the major institutions of governing and ruling the people are being rejected by the people. And so when you combine the crisis of neoliberal capitalism with the crisis of legitimacy, that is the people accepting the rule and governance of the governing class, it begins to make more sense than the narrative, which is clearly the narrative of the corporate media, that on November 8th, we got the worst president in the history of the United States, who, along with all of his reactionary views, and I want to say parenthetically, all of his views are not reactionary. Along with that, he is an idiot.
You're giving idiots a bad name.
Yes, yeah, maybe I'm giving idiots a bad name. But this narrative, which has pretty much been embraced by most of the left, is without any kind, I think, of understanding of a world beyond the politics of the United States and pretty much beyond bourgeois politics, electoral politics, Democrat and Republican politics. Now, and this comes from very sophisticated people. Need I mention Noam Chomsky? Need I mention Democracy Now? Need I mention most of the most recognizable left and progressive thinkers? So I begin there. A crisis that did not begin on November 8th. A crisis that had been brewing for some time. More than that, this is more than just an American phenomenon. Well, Brexit preceded our elections. But what about the rejection of constitutional change in Italy? What about the vote called for by Syriza in Syria in 2015, where the people voted to leave the EU? What about the political instability all across continental Europe? So this is not just an American affair. It is a crisis of legitimacy in the major centers of global capitalism. Now, unless, I'll stop, I'll end in a minute. Unless we have an interest in saving capitalism, this should be, if not a moment for rejoicing, a moment for making strategic decisions about how we move forward. Not the left alone, but the left along with the broad masses of people. For example, and I just Pennsylvania. You know, Trump couldn't have won the Electoral College without Pennsylvania. I'm from Philadelphia. Philadelphia decided the way that Pennsylvania went, pretty much. The Clinton people had hoped for something equivalent to what happened in 2012 with Obama. That they would come out of Philadelphia with a 480-some thousand vote majority over the Republicans. And that would carry them throughout the rest of the state of Pennsylvania. Well, something happened on the way to their victory. Black folk stayed at home. The black vote would have decided it. That is why Obama and Springsteen and Jay-Z and every other celebrity they could draw upon came to Philadelphia. The appeal was not on the basis of we will improve the conditions of life of Black Philadelphia. Philadelphia is, of the top 10 cities, the poorest in the nation. Proportionately, we are the most imprisoned city in the United States. They did not make an appeal that we would better your lives. The appeal was on identity. And if you did not vote for Clinton, Obama would see this as letting him down. Well, we let him down. And it was that 45,000 fewer black votes in the city of Philadelphia that accounted for the majority of the 70-some thousand plurality that Trump had over Clinton in the state of Pennsylvania. This had not happened in almost 3 decades, where the state of Pennsylvania did not go to the Democrats. And it reflected, some people say voter suppression. No. The votes were not suppressed in Philadelphia. In fact, there was a strong get out the vote in the black community movement that did not reach the level that it was expected to. And you know, again, you know, it was a moment for celebration for us, because this was a serious blow to our black misleadership class in Philadelphia. And you know, not to make a big thing out of it, we're trying to build on that. The crisis, the political crisis that is general, is most acute among the African American people. The crisis of legitimacy of all of the major institutions, though kind of covered over in a certain way by the Obama presidency and that kind of representation and identity politics, when you get below the surface, it is deep and deepening among black Philadelphians. And if I could just say just 2 quick things, just the political situation in Philadelphia, which was decisive, I think, in deciding Pennsylvania and probably the presidency. In 2015, there was a mayoral race. You know, in our city, whoever wins the Democratic primary, you know, kind of wins the election. There was a black candidate, a representative, classic, traditional representative of the black misleadership class, the black political class. And on the other side, there was a white racial moderate, not radical, racial moderate, who was a city councilman, who, because of his position on the city workers and wages and benefits, and because the largest unions in the city of Philadelphia are all black-led, the black labor leadership went with the white race moderate over the black misleadership class candidate. Okay? Which meant a rejection of that leadership. But if that were not enough, you know, we just had a district attorney's race. In that race, there was a white progressive, a supporter generally of Mumia Abu-Jamal, against stop and frisk, a defense attorney, never a prosecutor, never a politician, that never run for office. There were 7 candidates, one of whom was black. the black community voted overwhelmingly for the white progressive over the candidate of the blackness leadership class. So here we have evidence of a growing independence of thought and a willingness to vote not on the basis of representation or, quote, race in its most superficial construal, but on the issues, and a rejection of the leadership. And I think this is, I hope I'm not exaggerating. I think this is a pattern that is deepening, a rejection of the blackness leadership class and a search for a new type of leadership, and I would argue a leadership that moves the black community towards substantive and radical issues of transformation.
All right.
When we talk about the crisis of legitimacy, usually folks deal with that in terms of polls and whether the people believe that the powers that be and their institutions are legitimate. But there's another way to look at this phenomenon as well, and that is the behavior of the ruling class in terms of its own institutions. I mean, we have to see the electoral system, and in fact the entire United States setup since its beginning as a structure created by the rulers to facilitate their rule. And when they abandon these structures, when they politically undermine those structures, then we're looking at a real crisis. We're looking at the ruling class in crisis, and that is different than a rejection of the authorities by the underclasses. This is something even more profound, and we're witnessing this today. The rulers are undermining right now the office of the presidency. Imagine this, we have seen, certainly since World War II, a constant strengthening of the executive so that the rulers can more effectively carry out what they want to do in society, and especially in terms of war, through this executive. And yet, because of their panic over Trump, and we can talk about why they're so panicked over Trump, they are now undermining executive authority. Right. We see a corporate media that is a creation of the ruling class. This whole idea about balance in journalism, that journalism weighs right and wrong and finds some kind of middle, was created by the rich folks who owned the biggest newspapers so that they could set up a situation in which the parameters of discussion among the masses were shrunken to what the ruling class was willing to discuss. And so they made Columbia journalism schools and all these other J schools to narrow the spectrum of what journalism is. But now, in this crisis of legitimacy, we see the corporate media totally abandon all of its so-called ethics, or all of its commitment to balance and nonpartisanism and all those other phony values that they claimed to have. This shows that they have reached a point in which they've decided that they cannot rule in the old ways, but they don't know what the new ways are going to be. And that is the real danger of fascism. What do they do now that they abandon these bourgeois democratic premises and facades?
Yeah, this is very interesting, and you and I have talked about this for some time. See, I don't think that the fascists have to run for office or have to stage a coup d'etat to take power. The fascists are already embedded in the state. What do you call a John Negroponte? How do you politically define a Samantha Powers or a Gloria Nuland or a Susan Rice? I mean, you know, we could name them. They don't have to run for office. And as you mentioned, and this is very interesting, coming to the end of a 70-some year era of the, and I put quotes again, this is John Foster Dulles, the American century. That is the world constructed institutionally and politically and militarily by Americans and representatives of the American ruling class and political class. And as a part of that, a principal institution of this new American century is the American presidency. It is an institution of the, quote, American century. And by that, you know, that concept should be understood as a concept hatched by hegemonists. It's not a century of democracy. It is a century of the struggle to achieve complete hegemony over the people of the planet and its resources. And the American presidency, even more than the IMF or the EU or NATO, is the principal instrumentality of war. But if that is the case, then we have to understand what fascism is and is not. Our situation is not Germany of 1930, where fascism swept from outside and took power. The fascists have gradually taken power over these past 7 decades. And that is why, in many ways, the first black president is perhaps one of the most, if not the most, reactionary presidencies in the United States history. By every measure of war and peace, of democracy and social justice, Barack Obama is far more reactionary than Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, or even George W. Bush, or his father. I mean, I don't think there's any question about it. And this presidency became the instrumentality of a new hegemonism, perhaps reflective of a new desperation. The TPP and the pivot to Asia perhaps tell us more about the Obama presidency than perhaps anything else. To position itself for war in Asia, Northeast Asia, but that war would not just be with China or North Korea, it would extend to Russia, which is also an Asian, a Northeast Asian power. I just wanted to say one other thing about the crisis and contradiction of the presidency of the United States, which you were mentioning, Glenn. If we don't know anything else, the institution of the presidency is in a crisis the likes of which the country maybe has never experienced. Even at the time of the Civil War, the secessionist states did not throw the presidency into crisis. We are looking at a crisis of the American presidency. Now, if what I am saying is correct, that the American presidency is the principal instrumentality of war and hegemonism, what does it mean that that institution is in crisis? Let me just make one quick point. One quick point. It is a crisis of the capacity of American imperialism to carry out its objectives. That is the panic. Hold on, one last point then. One last point. Trump, let's be honest. If he represents anything, and of course, this is not a even and linear process, it's filled with contradiction. If he represents anything, it is the sense that we cannot afford to be the single hegemon in the world. Like him or dislike him, we don't want to pay for NATO. He insults Angela Merkel. The main, what is Germany? What has the 20th century Germany been? It has been the strike force of world imperialism. And still, Germany is the front line of the NATO forces going towards Eastern Europe and Russia. The contradiction between Merkel and Trump is a contradiction, I think, on the basis of can the United States bankroll world hegemonism and war? The other thing is the pullback from TPP. And whether, and none of this is, so you can't say, well, it's going to be this way. This is fluid. And the pullback from the policy of encircling China. Now, he talks a lot, too much, but what we see objectively is U.S. imperialism not being able to realize the objectives, i.e. no-fly zone in Syria. So everybody that wants Clinton in there, all right, you want a war with Russia. Let's be real. Is that what you really want? Clinton, Samantha Powers, Gloria Nuland, we push further into Ukraine, into the Baltic states, bring all of them into NATO, including Georgia, encircle Russia, give them a fait accompli, similar to what Hitler gave to them when he invaded the Ukraine. You love Clinton? That's what you get. With Trump, let's speak strategically. The presidency, the instrument of global hegemonism, and the one polar world is in crisis. Aren't we supposed to be in favor of crises of our opponents? Or do we not want them in crisis? I'll stop thinking.
We want them in crisis. But of course, when the wounded animal is hurting, he becomes dangerous. I think I saw that in some kind of little red book. If we're talking about the damage that's being done to that all-important instrument of the U.S. presidency, here's Here's an example. We now see a scandal being invented revolving around the back channel that Trump was supposedly trying to create, I believe through his son-in-law, to be able to speak to the Russians the way he wanted to speak to the Russians. And this corporate media is giving the impression that these back channels are somehow inherently suspicious, when in fact the opposite is true. Back channels are absolutely necessary. For you cannot have diplomacy without back channels, without contact with the other party outside of that noisy room. Because especially when we're talking about major parties in developed countries, there's all kinds of noise that's coming from the civil society in the various countries, from the feuding factions among the rulers in the various countries, from the machinations of different factions within factions. Noise, noise, noise everywhere, and it's coming from both sides. And so the only way diplomacy can be conducted is you have a room where people can sit and say, all right, screw that noise. This is what we are really talking about. This is, of course, becomes even more complicated when we have the secret services actively trying to undermine the executive. So that he certainly wants a conversation that's away from the usual channels. But this fundamental power of any presidency, not just a superpower presidency, but any presidency, is now being cast as something that is subversive, illegal, treasonous. And so here we see the ruling class undermining the very institution, the executive of global imperialism. This shows the disarray and confusion that they are operating.
I would say, you know, it's so interesting. It is the state undermining the presidency. But I think what it indicates, and I think this is a political education moment for everybody, is that political power is not in the White House or in the presidency. It's somewhere else. And this is the key. And I wanted to address one point that you were making. I'm sorry.
I just want to give another example, because we're in this age of Trump, and sometimes we can't think of anything else. But this undermining of the presidency certainly was going on during the Obama years. And we saw one of its most dramatic examples back in September of last year, after Obama and Kerry had very reluctantly, it appeared, agreed with the Russians to not only share intelligence, but to share and collaborate in targeting not just ISIS, but Al-Qaeda. And Al-Qaeda has been especially protected